Hey guys, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Again, just in case you forgot, I'm Jessica Black at It's Just Emile on Twitter, and welcome to our third edition of the We Show EPL. This is going to be another update. This is our November update for the 2021-2022 season. Thank you as always for joining us, and please remember to like the video and subscribe to the We Show Football YouTube channel. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce my co-host, guest, I don't know what to call him, but it's David Gerges at David Gerges SNTV on Twitter. Hey, David.
Hi, Jess. How are you? It's been a while.
It has been a while. It has been a while. Yeah, things have changed a lot since the last time we spoke. We probably talked during the first international break in late August, I think it was. There's been so many international breaks. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm happy that this is the last one for the year, but things have changed so much, and I think Tom is going to put up the league table so we can see how things have kind of changed. But, the last time we spoke, I think Arsenal were in 20th, Tottenham were at the top, and things have shifted around since then.
Changed, no?
Yeah, I think I think mostly on the managerial front, things have really changed. And then we kind of know that at the beginning of the season, you kind of can't start looking at things until after the 10th game because, things are just kind of up and down. But how have you been enjoying the Premier League season this time around? Fans are back in the stands, very competitive atmosphere. It's still close. Everybody's kind of within a couple of points of each other. Nobody's really running away with it as such. So how have you been kind of enjoying the season so far?
I mean, it's been quite temperamental, to be honest. I think the thing that really stands out is just all the sackings that we've seen and, clubs changing their manager early doors, trying to either stay in the league or have been disappointed with what they have seen since their summer business. So, yeah, there's been a lot of new faces, and it'll be interesting to see how these managers get on. And obviously, a massive takeover at Newcastle that has really, shaken a few clubs and obviously upset the apple cart. So, be interesting to see what happens now.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely going to be an interesting season. I couldn't predict it at this point if I tried. But let's talk about the sackings now, since that's probably the craziest things that's happened so far. 5 managers sacked in the 5 weeks. And I'll just kind of read through who they had and then who they brought in. And we'll just go through each one and you can kind of talk about what you think about the replacement. So first we're going to start off with Watford, and Xisco Mūnoz was sacked and Claudio Ranieri was brought in. No stranger to the Premier League, this guy. Been here, a couple of times. What do you think about the sacking of Xisco Mūnoz? I mean, let's be real, Watford sacked managers quite quickly, so it wasn't much of a shock. But bringing in Ranieri and then looking at the next couple of fixtures for Watford being very difficult fixtures, what do you think it's like for him, and what do you think about that appointment?
I mean, that's exactly it, really. Anytime Watford sack a manager, it's not exactly breaking news. He was there for barely 10 months in charge. And, I mean, given their form, it was almost expected, really. I think with Ranieri, the thing is, you've got to look at, what he did. You've got to move away from what he did at Leicester. I mean, that was an incredible story. I don't believe anybody has that kind of, expectation that, Watford are going to win so many games in a row. I mean, never mind challenging for a league title or anything or a trophy, really. I mean, I guess their ambitions now are just to stay in the league. But I think if Claudio, if we're going on what we've seen from his stint in Serie A just recently, I think it's going to probably be 4-4-2 and try and keep things tight. But as you mentioned there, he's got an incredibly difficult run of games coming up. Man United this weekend, and then I think it's Leicester, Chelsea, and Man City. So 4 really heavy defeats there, and we could be looking at another managerial sacking in a month's time, really.
When you look at Watford and you look at the team that they have, is there anything there that you can look at and say, if he can tap into that and improve those particular players or use those tools, he could kind of get out of this relegation scrap? I mean, it's not like you look at their team, there are some interesting players there. Do you see them having enough, if he can tap into that, to get away from this relegation fight?
I think it's going to be very hard for Watford to stay up. I've got to be honest. I think Claudio Ranieri is one of those people that people sometimes tend to have a laugh and a joke about. They never really consider him a tactician. I don't think that's fair, if I'm being honest. But at the same time, I think that people do look to his strengths in terms of his one-to-one management with players. And if Watford are going to have any success, then he's going to really need to tap into that. But I just don't know where they're going to get enough goals to stay up. So I think it's going to be very, very hard for them.
Yeah, for sure. He has a big job on his hands. And like you said, at the end of these next couple of fixtures, I would not be surprised if we saw a new manager come in. But it's kind of one of those things where you have to give somebody a chance to kind of get their ideas across. And, you already kind of knew you might lose these games. So it's about those next run of fixtures that are a little bit easier, where you could probably implement some of those things. But we'll see what happens with that one. But let's talk about Newcastle. Obviously, the big news around them is the takeover. And the one thing I can say about that is that I don't know a lot of Newcastle fans personally, but seeing them happy on socials made me happy, because I feel like they've been through a lot. And they had sacked Steve Bruce, and then it kind of took them a minute to kind of find the guy that they were going to bring into this setup early on in their project. And so they sacked Steve Bruce and brought in Eddie Howe after it seemed like something had fallen through with Unai Emery and even maybe Fonseca. So what have you made of the Newcastle takeover? Steve Bruce kind of feeling like maybe he was undervalued for keeping them up for so long, and the appointment of Eddie Howe. Is he good enough to kind of start off this project?
Well, I think we should rewind and go back to Unai Emery, someone that you're probably not too fond of as a Gooner. I think that would have been a real coup for Newcastle to get somebody like that. I mean, it obviously didn't end well for him at Arsenal, but I think he's shown yet again what a brilliant tactician he is. But it was interesting to see him step away from it and cite, that the structure wasn't really in place that gave him the confidence to take on that role. It's a big job for Eddie Howe. It's a really big job for him. But it was interesting reading his thoughts on what he's done with his time away from the game. And he obviously went to Spain, spent a bit of time watching Diego Simeone and the way Atletico Madrid play. And yeah, that's ultimately something that Newcastle will need right away. That defensive stability that that we associate with Diego Simeone's sides. It's going to be a big job for Eddie Howe, but I mean, I look at the job he did at Bournemouth, and yeah, ultimately he left after they went down. But he took a club from League One to the Premier League. In their first season, they finished 16th, but then you had 9th, 12th, 14th place finishes before they went down. I think maybe he could have left a season early. But I think Newcastle have got a decent coach there, a really decent coach, and they've got this budget now and money to spend, and I think it's going to be very important that Newcastle get the right faces in January. They don't just sign players for the sake of it. They need to sign the right players for the way Howe wants to play and the way we'll see them playing up until the January window opens. And with a few faces in and the right ones, they could stay up. And ultimately, that for me is a successful season for Newcastle, staying in the Premier League. They obviously don't want to go down now that they have all this money, and then see what the summer brings. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a big one at the weekend against Brentford at St James's. So yeah, they'll obviously want to get a start.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to come in and look at the fixtures and pick a game, Brentford maybe early on would have been something that you'd be like, oh, that's probably not who I want to play. But they're on a 4-game losing streak. So maybe Eddie Howe can get a little bit of a bounce there.
And they've lost their as well, David Raya, who has been brilliant and is a real playmaker from the back in goal. So I think that's a massive blow for Brentford.
Yeah, this is definitely a game that I feel like if Eddie Howe, this is a best case scenario, a team that's out of form, that he can maybe take advantage of maybe a lack of confidence there and use that boost, to move his players along. So we'll track that as it unfolds. They definitely need to survive. You don't want to start off this project with a relegation, do you? So we'll see what happens. But let's move on to Tottenham, Nuno Espirito Santo, and Conte. I mean, this one is really interesting just because, like, before Spurs hired Conte, there was a match against Manchester United that was jokingly called El Sacico or something like that, where, you know, it was mostly geared towards, is this going to be the end of the road for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? And Manchester United end up changing their formation. They win the game quite easily, 3-0, something like that. And within 48 hours, it was an acceleration, not for Ole Gunnar to be sacked, but for Nuno to be sacked. And they brought in Conte, who was also being looked at for the Manchester United job. How big of a signing is this, you know, for Spurs? Conte is looked at as one of the top maybe 5-10 managers in the world, has done massive jobs at Chelsea and Inter Milan as of late. How big is this for Spurs, and how much of a difference do you think this is going to make for them? Obviously looking towards the top 4, where maybe that 4th spot is up for grabs.
I think it's a massive signing for Tottenham. When you look at when Nuno came in, and he was 4th or 5th choice for the job. So even in September, when we broke for the international break and Spurs had won their first 3 matches 1-0, were top of the league, there wasn't really any excitement around Tottenham at all. And I mean, that result against Man United, I just thought Spurs were so uninspiring, and you know, they really had to just draw a line under Nuno, which is a real shame because you never like to see a manager lose their job. But I think Conte is going to come in, and I think you'll immediately see a difference with Tottenham. I mean, the blueprint for his success is really that 3-5-2 formation with the wing backs, and Spurs, you know, Spurs have the players there that really kind of match up to that framework and that way that he likes to play. So he's got the squad there. He's obviously going to be hoping for a lot more from Harry Kane, who is, not started the season well at all, and I think is still trying to get to terms with the fact that move to Man City fell through. But if Conte can kind of tap into that relationship that we saw between Kane and Son last season, then I think it's a real game changer for Tottenham. And for me, I think that could be the difference between them finishing in a Europa League spot and possibly sneaking into the Champions League places.
Is the most important thing for the future of this managerial appointment to work the relationship between Daniel Levy and Antonio Conte? That's a lot of if there was anything you could look at in this appointment where you could be like, that's probably the reason why it won't work. Do you feel similarly that relationship needs to work, and Conte is going to need the funds and Levy kind of needs to release them, you know, to get this team kind of turned over and bring in the quality that they need? Because Conte is known for asking and wanting those players to come in. Do you see that relationship being something that just they have to get that right in order for this appointment to work?
Well, I think something must have changed, because if you cast your mind back to the summer, Conte turned down the Tottenham job. You know, it was to him, and he refused to take it. So obviously some assurances that he sought weren't met by Levy and the board. For me, something must have changed for him to go back and accept this job now, especially with, Solskjaer could not be there in a few weeks' time, and arguably Manchester is a bigger club than Tottenham. So for him to take the Tottenham job rather than wait and see whether or not the United job is going to be available means that he must have had some assurances, some promises about money to spend in January. So I think that relationship is key between Daniel Levy and Conte. But I mean, the squad there, they might need a couple of faces in the winter and in the January transfer window. But I imagine that he's asked for certain needs that might be met in January.
Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting one to kind of keep an eye out on, because before the season started, you could have easily said, okay, the top 4 is nailed on. There's no open positions there. It's going to be Man United, Man City, Chelsea, and Liverpool. Now, with the way that Manchester United have started, the way that West Ham has started, and the appointment of Conte, you could easily see there being 3-4 teams really vying for that last spot, where you wouldn't have thought that at the beginning, So I think this is really interesting, and it changes. It could even have a ripple effect to the effect of like, what do other teams do in the January transfer window to offset what Tottenham are going to try to do, because that spot potentially could be open. So I'm interested to see what happens there, and what happens with Spurs against Leeds this weekend. I think people are going to want to see an immediate change, and we'll see what happens there. But I guess one of the more is it shocking? Is kind of how things have worked out in terms of Norwich and Aston Villa, and how they've sacked their managers, and it's like this. It's something I've never seen. I've only seen it in the Bundesliga, but essentially Daniel Farke. Well, actually, let's go with Aston Villa first. Aston Villa sacked Dean Smith, and he's been there for a while. He's known for being Villa through and through. We know that they lost Jack Grealish, and they had a good window, but it hasn't really manifested itself on the pitch just yet. Couple of bad results, not looking anything like what they looked like the year prior. Sacked Dean Smith, and Steven Gerrard comes into play here, and he leaves Rangers and ends up being Aston Villa manager. So many things to unpack here, because obviously Dean Smith ends up at Norwich just a couple of days after. For you, okay, were they a little bit harsh to sack Dean Smith so early on in the season, when he's been good for them over the last couple of years? Did he not earn the right maybe to try to turn it around, or do you think Aston Villa was right after such a big transfer window to sack him early to try to get something going, this season? Because they're underperforming in my mind at this point.
I think anytime a manager loses 5 games in a row, you're obviously going to be really under the spotlight, and there will be calls for the club to sack the manager, and they need to change. But I agree with what you said earlier, that Dean Smith did deserve the time, and it's just such a romantic story to have someone in charge of a club who supported the club as a boy, who's, as you say, Villa through and through. But yeah, I think the summer signings have really disappointed for me. Buendia coming in from Norwich, Leon Bailey from Leverkusen, and Danny Ings as well. And I think ultimately Dean Smith has paid the price for these players not really kicking on and really impressing for Aston Villa at the start of the season. I would have liked to have seen him stayed and given a chance to turn it around, and I think he probably could have, if I'm being honest. I think there are weaker teams in the division than Aston Villa, but Villa have made the call, and they've gone for Steven Gerrard. So it'll be very interesting to see him in his first job in the top flight in England.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those where you're looking at it, and it looked harsh, but over the summer there was a lot of talk around Aston Villa's ownership, and they actually, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Aston Villa's ownership actually have more money than a lot of the other bigger clubs. This is a club that, in my mind, is trying to really push to try to make those European spots. So when you're somewhere around the lower half of mid-table, and you've just spent like 100 million over the summer, I guess that does change the requirements, and you do sack a lot quicker. So I could see why they made that choice. Now bringing in Steven Gerrard is so interesting, because when you look at the Scottish Premier League, it may not be, it's definitely not one of the top leagues, but what he was able to accomplish there with bringing Rangers their first, trophy, or their first place finish, whatever you want to call it, in that league over Celtic, over it was 10 years since they had done it. That's really good. Breaking up dominance of a team like Celtic is no joke, but making the step from the Scottish Premier League to the English Premier League is significant. Do you think that he is ready for that step up? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Gerrard and what he accomplished at Rangers, you can't look beyond winning Rangers a league title when you think that Celtic had won 9 in a row, 9 seasons of utter dominance from a club. And to stop them from getting to 10 is a massive achievement at Rangers. But I would move more away from how Rangers performed in the Scottish League to how they performed in the Europa League. And when you think that Gerrard guided Rangers to 2 last 16 places in the Europa League, and that included victories over the likes of Braga in Portugal, Feyenoord in the Dutch Eredivisie, Porto in the Portuguese Primeira Liga, Galatasaray in the Turkish Superliga. So these are big European clubs, and Rangers beat all of those teams. So I think he's shown that he has the tactical nous in Europe. And together with Michael Beale, who I think is a brilliant coach, I think, they're going to make a real impression on that Aston Villa squad. So I think, it's more about looking at how Gerrard has coped in Europe, and that's really where the tactical battles lie, and where you see, the thoughts of European managers, and you're testing yourself against the best from other leagues across Europe. So I think it's more to do with Rangers' success in Europe, and the fact that they have had success in Europe means that I'm confident that he can do a very good job at Aston Villa.
I tend to think that this is a really good appointment, and something that he did an interview, and he spoke about paying your dues, starting from the bottom, really kind of working your way up to a job like this. And some people looked at it as a shot to maybe a Frank Lampard, or even maybe a Mikel Arteta, who kind of stumbled upon very high level jobs without actually having the credentials. But is there some legitimacy there that, like, maybe his paying his dues will give him a little bit more of a leg up moving from the Scottish Premier League to the English Premier League? There has to be something in it, kind of starting from the bottom, because some managers are kind of getting these jobs a little bit early, and it's proving to be above their level. And maybe this is his level based on him paying his dues.
Absolutely. And I mean, listening to his press conference yesterday, he absolutely quashed any talk of, Aston Villa being a stepping stone for him. He feels that this is the right job for him, and he's not looking at this as another stepping stone. This is where he wants to be. It's his chance to be a head coach in the Premier League. And I think those experiences at Rangers will really stand him in good stead for this.
So interesting. I'm loving it. So now let's get to the second part of the story, part 2, where Norwich end up hiring Dean Smith just maybe a week after he was sacked from Aston Villa. And I think this is a good appointment, to be honest. This is somebody who has been in and around this level of the Premier League, trying to fight relegation, get promotion if you do go down and have to come back up. And it'll give him an opportunity to kind of not prove people wrong, but just kind of give him a second chance, where I think he was kind of hard done by Aston Villa. But what do you think about this appointment? And not only the appointment of Dean Smith, but the sacking of Daniel Farke. I mean, Norwich have really done this yo-yo thing, up, down, up, down, up, down. Very dominant in the Championship, come up to the Premier League and be just not competitive at all. Do you think that Daniel Farke was just not the right man, or maybe they didn't give him what he needed to compete? And then also, what do you think about Dean Smith and his appointment? All the questions.
I mean, I think Norwich was superb last season, coming back up again. But that, as you say, that yo-yo effect can only go on for so long before you go down and you don't come back up again. So I think that sacking was coming. And with Dean Smith, I think it is a win-win, because you're bringing in a manager who has that Premier League experience, who kept Aston Villa up last season, but who also has the know-how and the knowledge of the Championship. And so, in a way, I don't want to sound too defeatist for Norwich, but it is almost a move where you're prepping for life in the Championship again. And for someone like Dean Smith, who knows that division really, really well, I think it's a really good move for Norwich.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all these appointments make sense to me, but we'll see where they definitely finish. And that's what we're going to talk about now, is where you think these teams will finish now, these clubs. So I think Tom is going to pull up the YouTube poll that We Show Football did or it was for the We Show Football community, asking where will Antonio Conte finish this season. So I think he's going to go ahead and pull that up. And yeah, I cannot see that. Okay, great. So it says, if Antonio Conte becomes the manager, which he has, where will they finish? A lot of people, the majority of people said top 6. You've said that you think that it's a possibility that they could finish 4th. Some people think that as well. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I do have to ask you just a quick question as well. Like, besides just where will they finish? Do you think that he can at least get them a trophy? Carabao Cup, FA Cup, even maybe win the Europa Conference League? What do you think about that?
I think a cup is absolutely up for grabs. I think there's no reason why, with a good draw, that Spurs can't go far in the FA Cup. But I do think that Spurs will take 4th. I'm going to stick my neck out on the line here. I think Conte will get Spurs back into the Champions League. So it's a massive signing for them.
Interesting. So we're going to go through the
percent are that think that Spurs are going to win the league. I think that's quite.
It's a little team called Man City, a little team called Chelsea, a little team called Liverpool that might have something to say about that. But hey, it is what it is, and everybody's entitled to their opinions. But so we'll just kind of go through quick fire. Where do you think Aston Villa will finish?
I think Villa will finish around 10 to 12 for me. So yeah, I'll be a bit cautious and say they'll finish top 12, 12th. But I
somewhere around there.
Yeah, somewhere around there, mid-table. But I think they'll be clear of the relegation zone for sure.
Yeah, and he'll need I think Steven Gerrard will need a preseason, another transfer window and stuff to really implement, because it's hard to come in mid-season. But I think 10 to 12 sounds about right. Watford, what do you think?
I think they're going down. I think it's between them and Norwich for bottom. So yeah, 19th, 20th for those two teams.
Eddie Howe and Newcastle, will they escape relegation?
It's a tight one. It's a really tight one. I thought about who else is there, and you think Burnley struggled again last season, but Sean Dyche always seems to find a way to keep them in the league. I think Newcastle might just sneak safety, and if they do, I can't see them finishing higher than 17th, to be honest.
And you kind of already said that Norwich, you feel like they're preparing for life back in the Championship, so we're thinking that they're going to probably get relegated as well.
Yeah, I think they'll probably bottom, maybe 19th, but I would be astounded if they finished any higher any higher. Yeah.
All right. Sacking season is among us. So that's what I call it, sacking season, the time between November and January, where, I've never seen this amount of managers, and I've never seen the merry-go-round the way that it has been for Aston Villa and Norwich. But very interesting times that we live in. But let's talk about young and upcoming players, the top 4 young players to watch update. So before, when we spoke, you had already had your list, and we kind of talked about them briefly. Let's kind of catch up with them and see how they've fared in this first quarter or whatever of the season. Let's start off with Emile Smith-Rowe. Yeah.
Very,
I'll let you go.
Very, what a very encouraging start to the season for this guy. Yeah, I saw him at the back end of last season and just thought a player with so much potential. And him and Saka are really encompassing this kind of, Arsenal turnaround, the two of them together. But Smith-Rowe, 4 goals, 2 assists. He's really become a pillar of that club and of Mikel Arteta's starting lineup. And then you think he's been rewarded with his first call up to the England squad, and even, scored on his debut against Albania at the start of the week. So it's been a brilliant start to the season for him. And I'm sure that you'll be hoping that he can continue this all the way through to the end of the season.
Yeah, the biggest things that I've seen with Emile is just his ability to stay fit. Knock on wood. Hopefully that continues on. But he kind of spoke about how Arsenal had gotten him a chef so that he could have the right food. They're still young kids. When they say things like that, you realize that they're still kids. They're probably still drinking Coke and not understanding how to take care of their bodies and stuff like that. So seeing him, get a better nutrition plan, and you see that manifest itself on the pitch, because now he can play multiple games in a row, 90 minutes here, 90 minutes there. He doesn't look like he's on the verge of breaking every single time he gets on the pitch. And he's just been wonderful. And since he's been a part of the squad since December 2020, the turnaround really started then. We really weren't able to make a lot of headway last season just because we had done so poorly. But since he's been in the team, things have been a lot different. So, we call this the post Emile Smith-Rowe era kind of thing. Like this is where he's made a huge difference. So yeah, I mean, he's pretty much starting where he finished last season, and now he's just added goals. But yeah, that's enough on him. We know he's a baller, so we don't have to go too far on that. But let's talk about Harvey Elliott.
Horrible injury. I mean, he started the season. He came off the bench in that opener against Norwich, but it was the 3 games after that. Starting against Burnley, which is a very difficult fixture. Chelsea at home, which was a big call from Klopp, and then the game against Leeds, which he got injured in. And it was just those 3 games that you really saw how much potential this player has. And then obviously he got that ankle injury and hasn't played since. But the latest news seems to be quite promising, and he's back out on the grass now. So I think Liverpool will be hopeful that he might be back in January. And I mean, that is coupled together with the fact that they're losing Salah and Mane to the Africa Cup of Nations. So they will need, they'll be light up front, and they'll need somebody in the way he was playing. I mean, he could seamlessly come back into the team for me. So yeah, it was a real shame to see him get that injury, because he was just playing so well and dovetailing brilliantly with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Salah off that right side for Liverpool. So it'll be good to see him back in the side.
Yeah, the biggest compliment I feel like I could give him is that he didn't look out of place. He didn't look like a kid out there playing with adults. He looked like he belonged in that team, and I was like, he's on his way. I think he had just gotten his call up to the under 21s as well, something like that, because he's only like 18. He's really young. Sad to see him have that injury, but it's good news that he'll be back soon in a time where Liverpool are going to really need him when the squad thins out a little bit for AFCON. But hoping for a speedy recovery for him. Let's talk Patson Daka. This is just somebody for me who he's going to explode. Like, he's going to explode. I mean, in the Europa League, in one of those games, he scored 4 goals on his own.
Yeah, exactly.
He's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he's played. I mean, it's been 4 sub appearances in the Premier League and 1 goal. But yeah, it is the Europa League where Brendan Rodgers has seemed to play him from the start. But somebody who is going to really push Vardy and Iheanacho up front for Leicester. And Leicester have been a bit disappointing this season, so it wouldn't surprise me if he begins to, start games a bit more and make an impact, from the start of the game. So, yeah, somebody who's got a lot of potential for me and can score goals, as we've seen already. So, yeah, very promising player for Leicester.
Yeah, for sure. I'm scared of this guy. Like, I really am. Like, that's somebody that, like, when Arsenal were playing against Leicester, I was like, they're going to bring him in. He's going to score a goal. It's inevitable, and he didn't. But he's so dangerous. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he grows over the back end of the season. But Michael Olise.
The Crystal Palace signed. He for me was a standout player last year in the Championship, and it was just such a shame that he missed the start of the season through injury. But yeah, he made his first start, I think, in game week 9, so 2 weeks ago against Newcastle. And if you consider that he's only played 149 minutes of Premier League football, so not even 2 matches, he's scored 1 goal and made 2 assists. So such a promising player. And they've got Eberiche Eze, who's on his way back. And Patrick Vieira, speaking today, said that he's going to be in the squad for the game against Burnley. So I think those 2 back for Crystal Palace, given the way Palace are playing at the moment, I think it's very exciting times if you're an Eagles fan. So yeah, a lot more to come from Michael Olise for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just the sub appearances that he's made, he may not have lit the world on fire. But you can tell that he's a player of quality. He's really good on the ball, very exciting player. And with Eze, as you said, coming back, and Edouard, he start off you expect people to need some adaptation. He hasn't really needed any. Zaha looks really happy. And I think if they continue on the way that they are, there's going to be a lot of big conversations around what Patrick Vieira has been able to do at Crystal Palace. Because, I'm making plans to come to England in the summer, or late spring, so April, May. And I'm making it a point to go see this Crystal Palace team live. I have to see it.
Yeah.
I have to see it because they're just so exciting. And of course, Patrick Vieira, Arsenal legend. But if they continue on the way that they are, it's going to be a lot of conversations around what Patrick Vieira has done for that team and the turnaround for them. But yeah, so that's a little update on the players that you had already highlighted. And I just added my little 2 cents here and there. But let's talk about 4 more players that you felt like have impressed you so far this season. And since we're talking about Crystal Palace, let's just continue on in that vein and talk about Conor Gallagher. What have you seen from him?
Great bit of business by Palace to get him on loan. And he's been so successful for them that Thomas Tuchel has already come out and said that Chelsea under no circumstance are even entertaining the idea of letting him go. And he's so excited to have the opportunity to work with him next season. And you think of a manager of his capabilities, of his qualities, and the success that he's had already with Chelsea, winning them the Champions League, and given all the players that he already has to work with, to be already looking forward and mentioning a player that's not even at Chelsea, just shows you how well Conor Gallagher has done. 4 goals, 4 assists. I think he's been fundamental for Palace this season. And yeah, as we were talking about with Olise and Eze coming back, I think that's going to benefit him even more when you have, the opposition having to think about 2 explosive players either side of him. So again, another one that, rightly so deserved his call up to the England squad and, made his debut against Albania as well. But yeah, a player that I think has enormous potential. And I think it's probably a bit of a difficult one for Palace fans that, he's only going to be there for this season maybe, and that they'll lose him in the summer. But let's just enjoy what he's doing at the moment with Crystal Palace, because he's been brilliant for them this season.
Yeah, he's been electric. I personally was, of course, I'm watching Emile and I want him to keep pace with Conor Gallagher, of course, because I feel like he's raising the level of goal scoring young players. It's looking nice on the ball and adding a little bit of flair is great, but he's also adding to the goals, in a team that maybe in the past hasn't scored enough. And so seeing him just kind of light up the midfield, he's really powerful and sprinty and aggressive, but he also adds goals. And that's hard to find, I think, in midfielders, especially young midfielders. So he looks like he's playing beyond his years and he's really confident. And I love that about him. So I'm happy that he got his call up. And it's going to be interesting to see what kind of role he has for Chelsea moving forward. They could easily use their academy and still be where they are because their academy players are so great. And we're going to talk about another one, I think. And Tino Livramento.
Yes.
Somebody else that comes from Chelsea's academy.
But yes, he made a call to leave Chelsea in the summer. I don't believe that they really wanted to sell him, but it was hard to turn down the fee that Southampton paid. And when you think that, Chelsea have already got Reece James who can play there, Cesar Azpilicueta who can play there as well. And he obviously saw that the kind of, the pathway to the first team was going to be a bit harder for him. But he's been, for me, probably one of Southampton's brightest performers this season. It's not been the best start for Southampton, I don't think. But in saying that, he started all 11 matches for Hasenhüttl and, marauding down that right side for Southampton. He's been a real bright spot for them. It's just a shame that, he hasn't, his attacking runs and his balls into the box haven't led to more goals. But you can see why they went for him. He's got such an attacking threat for Southampton, and it's shifted Kyle Walker-Peters over to that left side along with Salisu. So yeah, I think he's been very impressive for Southampton, and yeah, long may that continue.
Just 19 years old, so young. Like, I love that. Like young players making real waves, like not just showing up and just being there, actually making like changes in these teams. It's great to see. Another Chelsea,
Indeed, yeah.
another Chelsea player. Here we go, Trevoh Chalobah. What have you seen from him?
Yeah, Trevoh Chalobah. I mean, he's been brilliant for Chelsea as well. He's played 5 games this season. He scored twice in those 5 games. I believe they've only conceded 1 goal. So it's not as though he's coming into that back line and Chelsea are a bit more susceptible to conceding goals. No, he's been very, very impressive. So much so that they've offered it, that he's signed a new contract and will be at the club till 2026. So when you think that, there are a few players at Chelsea in their defence that are going to be out of contract in the summer, as things stand, Tony Rudiger, Christensen, I believe, still hasn't signed a new deal. Azpilicueta's out of contract, as well as Thiago Silva. So, a spot is opening up in the Chelsea back line, and the way he's playing at the moment, I'm sure Thomas Tuchel is really excited about having him in that defensive rear guard for Chelsea.
Yeah, I was reading some reports on Trevoh Chalobah, and since he's been integrated into the team, it's made Chelsea, the hierarchy at Chelsea, make maybe some decisions or even not make decisions on buying players outside of the team. Having players in your academy, coming through your academy and showing up the way that he has is making them have second thoughts about going out into the market and spending 40-50 million on new players. I think that's a huge coup for players like Trevoh Chalobah and even Conor Gallagher, if they could come back into that team, because Chelsea could buy anybody. But if you make them second guess and they don't bring in that player from Europe and keep you, and you can step up and be that guy, that says a lot. It says a lot about the strength of their academy and what they're doing. So yeah, he's been awesome as well. So let's talk about Ben Johnson. This is somebody that I haven't really seen that much of. So tell me what you've seen from him so far this season.
I think for me, the standout story in the league in general has been West Ham. I mean, the way they built on last season, how impressive they've been this season, and obviously that culminated in their 3-2 win over Liverpool before the international break. But he's really stood out for me when you consider that he's replaced Vladimir Kufal in the starting lineup. And I think Kufal, together with Cresswell last season, was absolutely superb for West Ham. And he has replaced him in the starting lineup and almost relegated him to the number 2. So we've seen Kufal in the Europa League, but not really in the Premier League since the start of the season. I mean, Kufal did start the season, and Johnson didn't play the first 6 matches for West Ham. But since he started the last 4 and has been so impressive for West Ham from fullback, I think that spot is his now, and he's been a real shining light for them. Has even got a goal for West Ham as well, so showing that he does offer that attacking threat as well as his defensive capabilities. So a really bright spark for West Ham, and I just think someone that we should really be looking out for the rest of the season. The one thing I will say is he's also another one that's out of contract in the summer, but I would imagine that there are real conversations going on behind the scenes about tying him down to a new deal, because I think a lot of Premier League clubs would really be interested in him if he was on a free next season.
Interesting. I'm definitely going to take, it's not that I haven't been watching West Ham. I just haven't been like watching out for this guy, but I definitely will be now because you make him sound really interesting. So yeah, I'm going to take some time to watch him play. But let's shift gears just a little bit and preview the match of the weekend, which is Liverpool versus Arsenal. And it's just funny because one's your team and one's my team, so it's like we're going up against each other. No, we're not. But let's talk about the form of each team, like so far, like, or maybe like even like just like last 5. I think that's where it got really interesting, is kind of like the last 5, the form of both teams. What do you think about Liverpool's form right now versus Arsenal's form at the minute?
I mean, it's nothing but praise for the turnaround for Arteta, losing those first 3 games without even scoring a goal. So Arsenal have really turned that around. But I think that was inevitable for me, really, when you think about the injuries that they had, and being able to bring Tomiyasu, White, Gabriel, Tierney as their stable back four. Ramsdale has really stepped up as well. So I think that Arsenal 11 really picks itself, and I think Arteta has thrived on being able to play that team again and again and again. And I mean, they've been impressive victories, but also I think about the nature of the opposition that they've played. Norwich, Burnley, this North London derby win is obviously a big one, but then you think Brighton, Crystal Palace, Villa, Leicester. So, I mean, this is Arsenal for me. This is Arsenal's first real big test, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they do, because they don't have a good record at Anfield. So how Arteta deals with that, if they have an early setback, how the team regroups and try and take the game to Liverpool at Anfield. So it's going to be very interesting, but I think you can ask for more from this Arsenal team heading into this game, full of confidence, with the likes of Saka and Smith Rowe in, arguably their best form. So it'll be very interesting to see what Arsenal do on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And from an Arsenal perspective, we know we're not great at Anfield. We don't match up well with Liverpool, especially over the last couple of years, because we haven't been able to match that intensity. Arsenal has not been a team that has dealt well with teams that really like to press, and Liverpool are an elite pressing team. So, but now I feel like Arsenal have a little bit more of a aggression about them, a little bit more of a physicality, and for me personally, I would like to see some competitiveness, and that may seem like putting the bar a little bit lower, but it's just interesting. The teams that Liverpool have struggled with are the teams that we struggle with. So we struggled with Brighton, and we also struggled with Brentford. You guys struggled against Brighton and Brentford as well. So from an Arsenal perspective, we're looking at it like, okay, well, those teams got points, so maybe we can. But ultimately, I think I just can't see it. I can't see it, because I just think we're going to struggle against the press like we always do, but we should be closer.
Yeah, and this is where I think there are still doubts over Thomas Partey, correct me if I'm wrong, whether or not he'll play, because I think he's had is it a groin injury?
It's a groin injury, and they're saying he's fit, but if the lineup came out tomorrow and he wasn't in it, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, and that's it. I always find that's one where it's best to kind of be cautious rather than take those risks, because if you do even more damage, it can be severe and you can lose the player for longer. But I think his steal in central midfield would be crucial for Arsenal tomorrow. Trying to stop Liverpool on the pressing from the front with the front three. So I think that would be a big loss for me for Arsenal. And I think there have also been doubts over Aubameyang, but dare I say it, if it was Arteta, I would rather have Thomas Partey going into this match over Aubameyang, because I think Lacazette can play that lone role up front. Whereas I think, for me, I don't believe Arsenal have a like-for-like replacement for Thomas Partey in central midfield. I mean, El Nenny's okay, but I think Partey's a much better player. So that would be a big loss for Arteta.
Yeah, I would imagine that Aubameyang is fit. I've heard nothing different. Thomas is coming off of a legitimate injury that, if he's not 100%, I would say just not play him. I think if you look at the table before, or the fixtures before the season starts, you kind of mark Anfield away as a loss anyway. And going into the next run of fixtures, do you really want to risk him? But from a Liverpool perspective, it felt a little bit like Liverpool may have had more players out than now, where it seems like everybody's back. No worries. Mane's not injured. What were you saying? He wasn't injured. So from a Liverpool perspective, who's actually out and in for this game?
Well, it seems like it's going to be touch and go with Henderson and Robertson, who both picked up injuries on international. So I think that's a big one for Liverpool. Luckily for Liverpool, I think they have a like-for-like replacement for Robertson and Tsimikas. And it seems as though Fabinho's okay. So I would expect Fabinho and Thiago to be those two in central midfield for Liverpool. But Liverpool have been somewhat disappointing for me, and I think Firmino is a massive loss for them. I think he just encompasses everything that is good about this Liverpool side, and the way they press front. I think Jota is a really good player and has a lot of promise and will score goals for Liverpool. But losing Firmino, I think, is a big blow for Liverpool. So that coupled together with the fact that defensively, I don't think they've been that great either. I think the West Ham game showed that you can really get at this Liverpool side. There's a blueprint for how you can really make them uncomfortable. Brentford exposed that. West Ham did the same. So I think Liverpool have the benefit of playing at home. And it's whether Arteta decides to change it a bit and go for that more aggressive approach, or if he decides that he just wants to play the way that he likes to play football. And it's shown in the past that teams, when they come to Anfield and decide that they want to play expansive football, Liverpool punish them. So I'd be very interested to see what Arteta does in that respect. But I don't think this Liverpool team have been at their best yet. So I'm curious to see what Klopp does to kind of stop a defeat turning into a run of two.
So all things considered, injuries, maybe Liverpool not being at their 100% best, Arsenal being on a good run of form, but never really doing well at Anfield. What do you predict the score to be tomorrow?
I still think Liverpool are going to win. I think they're going to have enough to beat Arsenal. I can see goals in it for both sides, but I'm going to go 3-1 to Liverpool.
Okay. I don't see Liverpool being able to score 3 goals against this back line. I think we lost, like last time Arsenal played at Anfield, I think it was 3-1. And that was with like Rob Holding and co. And I just don't see Ben White, Gabriel, Tierney, this group giving up that amount of goals, this goalkeeper giving up that amount of goals. I think it'll be a lot closer, but I still think Arsenal I think it'll be a respectable loss, if that's what you can call it. So something around maybe like a 2-0 or a 2-1 to Liverpool. And
Well, all of that without even mentioning Mo Salah and how well he's been this season. So
he has been amazing, yeah.
I think he's really saved Liverpool at times this season. But I think him and Mane, it's good to see that Mane's not injured as well, because he just gives Liverpool that electric pace off the left. But
don't remind me.
I think those two are going to be very important for Liverpool tomorrow. So it'll be a very interesting game.
It will be. It's the game of the day or the weekend, so we'll definitely see. And we'll reconvene at some point within the next couple of weeks/months and see where everybody is at. So that's going to be it for our little update here, our November update for the 2021-2022 season. That's going to be it for me. My name is Jessica. You can find me on Twitter at @itchasinio. Don't forget to follow David at David Gerges SNTV. Thank you so much, David, for being here.
Thanks, Jess.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys on the next one.